everybody. Okay, so now we're working out of the intermediate algebra textbook. And so in case you're following along, and we won't be doing this entire section. We're only doing part of it. The only thing that we are doing out of the textbook is the distance and the midpoint formulas. There are a couple other things in this section of the textbook that you'll learn in another class. So again, if you're following along, you'll see that I've left some things out, and I have done that on purpose. All right, so we're going to talk about the distance formula, and the distance formula is actually going to be something that looks pretty familiar to you. You've used something very, very similar to it. In fact, the distance formula is derived from it. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So we're going to find the distance between these 2 points, okay? So let's graph 6, 4, which is right here. And let's graph 2, 1, which is right here, okay? So we want to find this distance right there. That red line is what I'm searching for at this point. Now, you can't just count. You're not allowed to do that, okay? Because it's a diagonal line, you can't just count. So what we have to do is we have to look at this as far as a right triangle, okay? And so what we're finding is, this is our right angle, so we're finding the hypotenuse of this right triangle, okay? Now, you are allowed to count vertically, and you're allowed to count horizontally. You just can't count diagonally, okay? So the distance between this point and this point is 1, 2, 3. The distance between this point and this point is 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we can use the Pythagorean theorem, I lost it for a second, in order to find what this hypotenuse is, okay? Oops, there we go. The hypotenuse, okay? So we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem, which says that you have a squared plus b squared equals c squared, okay? And a and b are the legs that make up the right angle, all right? And your c is your hypotenuse, all right? So we want 3 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, and we're still searching for the c, not c squared. We don't want c squared, so whenever we come up with this, we're going to have to take the square root to come up with just plain old c, okay? So 9 plus 16 is 25, is equal to c squared. Now, to get c, we have to take the square root of both sides. So c is equal to 5, all right? Now, the distance formula will look very, very similar to this. So, you take your points and you find the difference between the x values, and then you square it. You add that to the difference of the y values squared, and then you take the square root of that, okay? So, this is a formula that you probably should write down at some place in your notes and use this later. Okay, so remember, using the distance formula, we want the square root of the difference between our x values, so -5 minus 7, we want to square that. We want to add that to the difference of our y values, so -3 minus 2, and we want to square that, okay? So let's do some math here. So we've got the square root of, let's see here, that's -12 squared plus -5 squared. Now, remember, anytime you square a negative, you don't get a negative anymore, okay? So you get 144 plus 25. So we want the square root of 169, which is 13. So the distance is 13. Okay, so this problem says use the distance formula to find the distance between these 2 points right here and then write the answer in exact form, then find the decimal approximation rounded to the nearest tenth. That's 1 decimal place. All right, now, so let's use the distance formula. So we've got the square root of the x, let's see here, x minus x, and then we have to square that, plus, now we're going to do the y's, negative 4 minus 5, and we have to square that. Okay, so this ends up being the square root of, let's see here, change, that's 11 squared plus negative 9 squared. So we end up with 121 plus 81. Okay, and whenever we add those together, we get the square root of 202. All right, now, we can't reduce this. Like, this is as good as this gets if you want the exact form, okay? But we can type it into the calculator. So second, and then I'm going to hit the x squared button, and then 202, enter, and I end up, the approximation is 14.2. All right, and that is our distance. All right, so now we're going to work on the midpoint formula. Okay, so the midpoint formula, this is our x and this is our y. Okay, that's why there's a comma in between. And what this says to do, if you want to find the midpoint between 2 points, you add your x's together and divide by 2. And that gives you your x coordinate. Then it says you add your y's together and divide by 2, and that gives you your y coordinate. All right, let's work on this. All right, so this problem says use the midpoint formula to find the midpoint of the line segments whose end points are negative 5, negative 4. So let's plot that first. Negative 5. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's negative 5. Negative 4 is down here. Okay, now I have to draw it. And my eyeballs don't want me to see it. So let's see here. Okay, there's negative 5, negative 4. Yep, okay. All right, now the other one is 7, 2. So let's go, let me zoom this in a little bit. 7, 2 is up here. So I want to find the midpoint between these two dots, okay? All right, so now, keep in mind I did not use a ruler to draw that line. That's why it's not a perfect straight line. So here's how we use the midpoint formula. So our x coordinate is we add our x's together and we divide by 2. Okay, so our x coordinate is 1. All right, our y coordinate, we add our y's together and we divide by 2 as well. Okay, so then this is negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. So our ordered pair for our midpoint is at 1, negative 1. Okay, so let's graph that on here. 1, negative 1. Look at that, my line went right through it. Very cool. All right, there's our midpoint. Okay, remember, add your x's together, divide by 2. Add your y's together, divide by 2. All right, this page is just a recap of the formulas that you found. Now, here's where people get confused. I want you to notice that on the distance formula, you subtract your x's, but then you square them. So you don't ever have a negative number under this radical, okay? Because whenever you square even a negative, you end up with a positive. Now, with the midpoint, you add your terms together, okay? You add your coordinates. All right, so just don't get that mixed up. Make sure that you write this down in your notes, okay? Because you're going to need it. All right, that's it for this video. It's a nice and short one. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and have a wonderful day.